the more things change, the more they stay the same. After a small little famine, Kilkenny are back in the All-Ireland final. I'm joined by former Kilkenny hurler Tommy Walsh. Where do we start?
Yeah, MT, I suppose we started at the very beginning because it was the first 11-12 minutes. Kilkenny were just, I've never seen them as hungry or as ravenous. They just, every man, it was like, I suppose, going back to 2006 All-Ireland, there was 3 men around every Limerick guy. And I think they went into a 1-8 3-point lead, and that was probably the winning of the game. And they were able to, when Limerick came back at them, then they were just able to keep that hunger and work rate going. And sometimes then you get a bit of luck, and I put it down to the first couple of minutes.
I spoke to Brian Cody downstairs, and he was putting emphasis on that exact thing. He said there was no secret to it, it was just work rate. Now people might be thinking, but sure, isn't it simple then just to work as hard? What does that actually mean, to explain that to the normal person watching this?
Yeah, well, you need to have brilliant hurlers as well, like there's no point in saying otherwise. So Kilkenny, like we said it before the game, like they do have brilliant forwards. Like they've put up huge scores in all their games in the Leinster round robin. Again in the quarter final, they scored 227 against Cork. And what does it mean to work hard? You can go back and look at the first half of that match, and that'll show you. It just means lads are out in front. Every time the ball is near them, they're edging, they're tipping their lad. When it's out over the sideline, they're driving them out over the line, but all going for the ball. It's just a ravenous hunger and courage to win the ball at all costs, and that's, I think, in layman's terms exactly what it is. But if you really want to know, you can talk all you want. Go back and look at the first half and you'll see exactly what hunger is.
Limerick, obviously they're not an easy team to beat at all. Was it that they started off a bit sluggish, or was it just that work rate that Kilkenny just didn't let them start the way they wanted to? Yeah,
well, I suppose again you have to go back. I didn't think the 4-week layoff would affect them, and possibly like it was 15-20 minutes before they grew into the game, and by God they did grow into the game. They had it back to 2 points at half time. They won the penalty just before half time. But how did they come back into the game? The Kilkenny half backs, you see, stood. So for the last couple of years we see everyone, especially because the sharp passing is now so often used in the game by most teams, you can't really give your opponent even 2 or 3 yards. So all defenders were kind of touch tight with the opposition forwards. But today the Kilkenny half back line, they stayed in their positions, and the Kilkenny midfielders then did all the work out around midfield. So I felt that was definitely a massive tactical win for Brian Cody, because what it meant is that there was no beautiful ball really going into the Limerick full forward, albeit Gillan was very dangerous inside when he did get the ball. Yeah, he caused a penalty, he scored the penalty, and he was whizzing around there like you said, and when he got in there he got into dangerous positions, and Kilkenny didn't pay for it as much perhaps as they could have, for the pure reason that Limerick shooting just was off today. It was off, and it probably came back down to the pressure that they were being put under, because I know myself that when you're going to shoot and there's no one really kind of coming on top of you, it's much easier to put the ball over the bar. But if you can hear a lad beside you or see a lad out of the corner of your eye come near you, suddenly you're put off, and that's when you start hitting wides. So I think what happened was they were hit so ferociously in that first couple of minutes that all day long they're expecting a tackle, they're expecting a hook, expecting a block, and that can definitely affect your accuracy. Like Limerick don't often hit so many wides, but just today, unfortunately for them, they hit the wides. There was a few talking points from this game. One, I think, was Aaron Gillan, how he kept getting into position, which will worry Brian Cody over the next 3 weeks to be wondering how did that happen. The second thing is, I felt Shane Dowling when he came on as a super sub. You talked about sticking to your man earlier and not creating space, but he found space and he cut through, and there was no Kilkenny man near him to stop him. And there's a few times that we watched Barry Nash do a few runs, and I could hear you shouting, "See Barry Nash, see him, does anybody see him?" I felt that Kilkenny are still by no means the finished article yet. No, absolutely not. They're in the All-Ireland final, and that's the only thing they can take from this, because whoever comes out with tomorrow's final, whether it's Wexford or Tipperary, it's going to be a 50-50 game, I think, at this stage. There won't be any clear-cut favourites anymore going in the home stretch. Going back to Nash, or going back to Aaron Gillan and the space he was and say the positions he was getting himself into, I think you just have to put that down to the great runs that he was putting in, because I was watching him. He runs one way, he runs another way. What can you do? There's not much you can do, because as we said, most teams are playing now with 2 guys inside, so you have no real cover. Usually you'd have cover if there was a three men inside. The 3 defenders inside will be kind of covering for each other. But when there's only 2 inside, there's very little you can do. You have to nearly follow your man. So I think that's just the way the game has gone, and I think they just cut out. There was damage limitation really by when the Hegartys and these guys looked up. When they looked up, they could see the Kilkenny wing backs in their positions, so it made it much harder to hit in lovely ball all day long. So I would put a lot of the praise and that for this victory to the Kilkenny midfielders and half hour line for the hits. Like John Donnelly, what he did in that first 15 minutes was incredible. Like, he was laying lads on the ground. I think Will O'Donoghue there, in the first half, just hitting them, and every time that you do that, it takes a lot out of you, and I think that was the springboard.
I mentioned talking points. The big one obviously is that final puck of the game. With the naked eye here in the press box, I didn't see, was it deflection? I assumed that perhaps it was just a bad strike or whatever, but from looking at different video footage from different people, it looked like it was deflection, and instead of being a puck out, it should have been a 65 in, which, as we all know, Limerick would have scored more than likely, and then it would level the game extra time, and who knows, you mightn't be a happy cat going home tonight after all. John Kiley downstairs said yes, he thought it should have been a 65, but it wasn't, and Sinead, c'est la vie, he said that's life, we move on, we build a bridge. It'd be very hard though.
Must be very difficult, in fairness. It's not too bad when it's like, you go back to the penalty that was given against Hugh Lawler. Technically, of course it was a penalty, but they're never given, because like when the ball comes into the square, there's always going to be a little bit of pulling, a little bit of dragging. You go to the penalties in soccer, or sorry, the corners in soccer, like, you could give a penalty for every corner that was ever taken. So that one at the end, like, I think myself, over the course of games, listen, you would be angry if you're a Limerick man at the end, but I think over the course of the 70 minutes, I think they do balance out, and maybe even not over the 70 minutes, could even be over the course of the season. Sometimes you get a lucky break, sometimes you don't. Like, as we said, nobody here really saw it. Now, we were on the Hogan stand side of the pitch. It happened over on the Cusack stand side. None of us saw it. So the naked eye, it's very difficult. So
we were nowhere near as officials now.
No, but they're watching so much as well. Like they only have the 2 eyes. They can only look at one place at the one time. So it's very easy to make a mistake like that. Like, and the only way you could cut out things like that would be for your going back on the VAR, if you like. But we see the hardship that's causing doesn't really solve much either. So I think, listen, it's unfortunate, and it's definitely going to hurt Limerick that it happened at the very last puck of the game. But listen, there's not much more you can really say about it,
That's the thing, because Limerick are going to go home very sore from that, physically and mentally. They'll be thinking about what could have been. I'd imagine the referee, be that he's only a man and not a machine and not a robot, and the game goes so fast that he didn't set out to miss anything, and I'm sure if he thought, it would have been called back. And therefore, that's another man who goes home possibly with the weight of the world on his shoulders tonight. VAR might not be the answer, but what is the answer? Do we just, in 2019, do we have to suck it up and say, Sinead, is that good enough now?
That's what I think it is. Like, we were on the receiving end of a few of them ourselves at club level and things over the years, and you know what? You have to say, if you're good enough, you'll go on and win it. You could be making excuses every day of the week, and listen, when you do lose, and as I said, I've been there so many times, giving out with this lad and that lad, but you know what, sometimes you have to shake yourself and say, you know what, over the course of the game, were we the better team? Did we do enough to win it? And I think, listen, in your heart of hearts, you'll always have the right answers.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it that Kilkenny were the better team here today, because at no point did Limerick actually lead. They could have drawn perhaps at a very pivotal moment, but they didn't, and now they're out of the championship and Kilkenny are there. That means the next 3 weeks of All-Ireland build-up, which hasn't happened for a few years now in Kilkenny. The little famine is now coming to an end in an All-Ireland final, but tomorrow, or today by the time this goes out, Wexford and Tipperary are going to do battle. Who's going to be joining the Cats in the All-Ireland final, Tommy?
Yeah, like if you look at the Limerick performance in the first 15-20 minutes, so that's kind of what we've seen out of Tipperary the last 2 days. If Tipperary come like that, I think Wexford will win it, but I don't think they will. So I think Tipperary will come zinging. Sheedy has, Kilkenny now are in the final. It's a chance for Sheedy to get back. get back there, they'd see themselves with a great chance of winning the final then. You know, the fact that Limerick are gone, they were the real favourites, I suppose. So I think Tipperary will come out zinging tomorrow, and the only way I think Wexford can win is, you know the way they play, very defensively, they bring back all their players and they come shooting forward and they score kind of from midfield, half-forward line. If their shooting radar is on, that's the only way that Wexford will win, because against Kilkenny in the Leinster final, they only missed 2 or 3 chances. Now you have to give them credit for that, and I've always said it, that Wexford are brilliant hurlers. They won 3 under-21 Leinster finals against very, very good teams, and they have the hurlers. You have Chin, you have Conor MacDonald, like say in the forward line you have Rory O'Connor, Jack O'Connor, like they're brilliant players. So I think for them to win tomorrow, they're going to have to take their chances from out the field, which I think is difficult at this time of the year. I think you have to be penetrating inside. So I think if Tipperary come with the zing, they will be in the final.
I'd imagine you'd like a Kilkenny-Wexford All-Ireland final. You'd enjoy it, personally?
Well, what I personally like to see, I suppose, Wexford in a final, because we've seen during the week the show they had down in Wexford at Woolley Parkinson, like the place was gone wild. Tom Dempsey was singing the Purple and Gold, Larry O'Gorman was singing Dancing at the Crossroads. The place was rocking, and that's what Wexford bring to the whole thing. Like, I think they're expecting 45,000 Wexford people alone to be at the match tomorrow. As I said, I'm around Croke Park since early this morning. Wexford jerseys, Wexford people around the place. They're just bringing an enthusiasm and a joy and a buzz to the whole place, and that's what could bring them over the line tomorrow, is just that feeling in the county. Sometimes momentum is an amazing thing. You can just feed off it, and you think you're, like Conor MacDonald was giving an interview in the paper today, how they expect so much of themselves now. So that feeds in, and lads clapping you on the back and driving you on. So you know, it will be an amazing day tomorrow, and I'd like to be here tomorrow, but I think it will be a spectacle.
And that's a good place for me to tell people now, you're not going to be here tomorrow because you're going to be at the zoo. So tell us, before we wrap up, what's your favourite zoo animal and why?
The zoo animal, the lion.
Why?
Actually, I always loved the Lion King when I was a young lad. Mufasa is my man, so we'll go and see a few Mufasas tomorrow.
Have you seen the Lion King sequel yet?
I did, yeah, I saw it there this week, and fairness, it was a good movie.
Which is better?
The cartoon.
But so the original, you're an original man.
The original, yeah.
Why? Is this because it brings you back to your childhood and you remember watching Mufasa as a little boy, thinking someday I'll be a top cat like them too?
Yeah. Well, I suppose, you know, from my hurling analysis, I'm kind of a traditionalist, and I'm always looking at the past and enjoy kind of recounting stories of it. So it's always hard to go past the original, and there was just some great scenes, and I suppose Simba, so much went against him in the first few minutes of that movie, and he came back to save the day. So just a kind of an epic Disney movie.
Well, who knows, you wouldn't know. Kilkenny might have their own Simba moment now, coming in the All-Ireland final after a few years of adversity when it comes to Kilkenny hurling. Tommy, Gurmila Magat.
Thanks, MT.